I've arrived muted. Is there a mass mute policy?
There is indeed, Robert. I'll give you the details when we kick off. But it's the same policy as last time.
I think we're ready to make a start when you are, Councillor Cloak.
I'm here and ready. Are we ready to go? I'll just wait. Liz says she's going to be with us in 2 minutes. Can we wait 2 minutes?
Yes, if you like.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, I think Liz has had her 2 minutes, so I will start. Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the South Essex Parking Partnership Joint Committee. I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being streamed live on Chelmsford City Council's website and being recorded. I'd just like to remind those taking part of a few things. One, hopefully you are taking part from a place where you will not be disturbed or distracted. Two, when you are not actively participating in the meeting, I would ask members and officers to keep their audio and video turned off. Anyone wishing to speak should type an H in the chat box, which you get to by clicking on the Show Conversations button on the toolbar. You will then be called to speak when it is your turn. All questions and contributions must come through the chair. And please remember to turn on your video and audio when I call you to speak. Any councillor with a pecuniary interest in any item should declare it and keep their audio and video off when it is being considered. They will not be included in any vote on the subject. When it comes to a decision on any of the recommendations or motions before us, I will assume that if no one says that they oppose them, everyone will be in agreement. If anyone says that they are opposed, I will ask for a formal vote to be conducted. Finally, if we do lose the live stream on the website, I will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes and hopefully the problem can be fixed. If it cannot, I will adjourn the meeting until a future date. Thank you. Right, you've had that. Just before I hand over to Brian Mayfield for apologies for absence and substitutions, I'd like to welcome Councillor Edfer, who has taken over at Rochford from Councillor Steptoe. Brian, I'm in your hands. Please go.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the public watching, the councillors present are yourself, John Cloak, from Brentwood, the Chair of the Joint Committee. Also, as you just mentioned, Daniel Efter from Rochford District Council, David Harrison from Basildon, Simon Hart from Castle Point, Mike McCrory from Chelmsford, and Robert Mitchell from the County Council. From the partnership, the officers present are Nick Binder and Russell Panter. Michael Packham is also here from the City Council to deal with the financial matters before you. And there are several other officers from the various district councils in attendance should they be needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda, the minutes of the Joint Committee. Just before we come back to members, there's a couple of points that we need to pick up. I'm told that Russell Panter would like to advise us on page 4, item 10 on Billericay and Whitford High Street enforcement. Russell, you're on. Russell, you're muted. That's it.
That's it. Okay. Yeah, all it was really was just a bit of an update on the Wickford and Billericay High Street issue. Since our return on the 1st of June, we have been doing a lot of work in the high streets just to make sure that the local economies are not affected too much. And especially in Billericay, there is a lot of loading areas which have to be monitored quite closely, and various other restrictions. Both Billericay and Wickford do receive quite a high number of enforcement patrols, averaging around 2 to 3 per day. One of the issues we do particularly have in Wickford is that the officers will go down to attend reports of parking on single and double yellow lines, but they do find that quite a high majority of those vehicles have blue badges, which allow for a 3-hour concession for them to park. So those vehicles will be logged and the officers will return, but generally we find that the blue badge scheme is being adhered to and those vehicles will have gone. But just to assure the committee that the high streets in all the areas are of a high priority to us, and we do a lot of work within those high streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Any questions for Russell? No, right, thank you very much. Also, Nick Binder would like to update us on the TRO timeline report, which was on page 9 of the last minute. Nick, please.
Unmuted.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just really at the last meeting, we said that we'd aim to bring a report to the committee regarding the current TRO procedure and timelines. Unfortunately, I was probably a bit ambitious at the time with the timelines available. We have done quite a bit of work on this, but we really weren't in a position to present to the committee at this point. I still need to do a certain amount of consultation with lead officers, and there's some potential changes to the process which I need to get some clarification from our legal department as well. So really, we're close to finishing that report, but it's not available at this point. There's also some, and I'll be picking up on some points later in the agenda around some consultations that are happening within central government, and that may fit into some of the areas we're looking to improve. So we will definitely have something by December, and we'll also hopefully have some outcome from some consultations at that point as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Binder. Again, has anybody any questions, or shall I move on? I'm not seeing any H's, so I'm hoping we're okay. Public question time. I don't think we have any members of the public, do we, Brian?
No, we don't, Chair. Not at this meeting.
Thank you very much. In that case, we move on to item 5, operational and performance report from Russell Panter. Thank you, Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so just to give the members a brief rundown of the situation of our return after lockdown, just to let people know that all of the SEPP staff were provided with sufficient PPE, masks and gloves and sanitizers, and a working protocol for enforcement within our COVID policy. Some things that we introduced were staggered start times for staff to reduce the number of people in offices at one time, assigning vans specifically to one officer so they didn't share vans, so all of the CEOs have been working that they've followed. They've had full PPE and followed strict protocol to ensure that they and the public have been as safe as possible. Some of the feedback from the CEOs was that the return after lockdown was initially a very good response, and a lot of areas and people were happy to see them out and working again. They was issuing a lot of warning notices for at least a month and giving certain areas specific concessions to allow for more people working from home. And as we've moved into September, it appears to be much more back to business as usual. But the return to work from the lockdown was challenging, but overall has been quite successful. And since coming back, we've been working under a new structure. We've got a new enforcement team leader, a gentleman called Adrian Rayner, who's come in and made an immediate impact and has been aligning himself to the staff and looking at rotas and shadowing and shift patterns to ensure efficiency and productivity. Emma Cross, who was an existing member of staff at SEPP, has come in as a new enforcement team leader. She's working covering Castle Point and Brentwood. And Colin Phillips, who was an existing team leader, has been helping to integrate those two members of staff and continues to do a good job. So I just would like to mention the team leaders are really they're the silent cogs working in the background, ensuring that all of the CEOs are looked after and catered for and have all the equipment and help they need. Another new introduction to our service was through Orbis, and we've moved from using a phone app emergency system to an item called an Orbis 1000 device, which is a physical fob. It's an actual alarm fob that the officers now hold on them. It's got two-way communications, GPS, red and amber alerts, and the feedback from the CEOs is that's been very good, and they feel much more supported. We have had to use the Orbis devices, unfortunately, a few times since we've introduced them, and the response from Orbis has been excellent, and they've contacted the CEO immediately and provided some guidance. So we've added that to our health and safety PPE, and that seems to be working well. We've also recently had the Brentwood SLA has now been signed and is in place and operational. SEPP provided all of the Brentwood team with the new equipment, and Brentwood team and SEPP are now working very closely together. SEPP have been utilising the Brentwood team on day shifts where SEPP is short. And also the Brentwood team have also been doing their own late shifts covering the high streets and hotspots. And we're also still working closely together on the joint initiative to try to combat issues around the evening economy in the high street. And very quickly, a very good relationship has been created with the help of Daniel Cannon from Brentwood and Emma Cross from SEPP, and they're operating in a very professional and productive manner. So as it stands at the moment, the Brentwood SLA is working very well. As some of you may know, about a year to 18 months ago, SEPP moved from leasing all of their vans from Go Plant to a company called Riverside. And we did this with the help of Basildon Council, using Basildon Council's lease framework with Riverside. We now, after that time, only have a handful of Go Plant vehicles left, and I would say about 3/4 of the vans we now lease are through Riverside. So that is a really good scheme. It's very efficient. It saves a lot of time and resource, and it's working very well. And just finally, just an update on Basildon Council's, should I say Basildon Council, SEPP's CCTV card that works within the Basildon Borough. Next week, the company that provide that vehicle, SEA, are attending to upgrade the software that runs alongside the vehicle called Roadflow. And this will be the start of phasing the car in to not only doing enforcement, but also patrolling residence permit zones. So there will still be quite a lot of work to do with Chipside and the My Permit system. And then obviously we will need to introduce a protocol of how we use the vehicle in that capacity. But that is all due to start next week. So that is everything from the operational update. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Russell. Particularly, thank you very much for the stuff you've done with Brentwood. We do appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we are going to item 6. Unless there are any questions, sorry, I should have asked. But I can't see any hands coming up, so, or H's on the side. No, right, thank you. Move on to the financial report. Michael Packham, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Michael, if you can turn your video on, please.
I think I have.
Oh.
Can you see me? Yep.
No, I can't. Hold on, I'll try reconfiguring Zoom a bit. If not, carry on anyway, and we'll take it. We'll just have to listen to you.
Okay. So the financial report outlines the position of the partnership from the 1st of April to the 26th of August. And the position to this date was a deficit of £129,468 for SEPP and a deficit of £189,617 for the TRO account, resulting in an overall deficit position of £319,086. Just to note as well, this is an improvement from the last time a report came to this committee of £59,463, and that's largely occurred through income picking up again slightly in July and August with the gradual easing of lockdown, and that's particularly illustrated through PCN income, which has continued to improve as the years moved on. So July, for example, we received just over 55% of the income that we received in the same month last year, which compares to just over 10% when you look at April for this financial year compared to last. The use of reserves is unchanged from last reported to this committee. So once you take into account that £123,880 use of reserves, the total deficit for the partnership to the 26th of August was £442,966. And I believe there's some more financial information that Nick will be touching on later in the business plan as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Michael. Are there any questions, please? I can't see any H's. Right, thank you. I'm assuming not. We will then move on to Nick's update on the business plan. Thank you very much. Nick, you're on.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's just really picking up from Michael's report and the financial situation. As you know, on the 6th of December 2019, when we agreed the business plan, we had high hopes that it'd be business as usual, and we expected similar outturns to previous years, but clearly the COVID-19's had a big impact on that. So really, the Appendix A is sort of really setting out the performance in the first 4 months of the year, and really that does a comparison against the previous year's outturn and against the numbers that we estimated in the business plan. Michael's quite right in that the PCNs is 65% of our income comes from PCNs, and that's quite a fundamental factor to how the business plan performs. So in the first 4 months of the year, we're currently 69% down against the previous year, which is obviously expected because April and May we had no enforcement whatsoever. In June, we had limited enforcement, and as Russell was saying, there was lots of warning notices, and really that was a softly approach as we came back into the operation. So really, the 1st of July was our first full month where we could say that we were back to normal. And at the moment, the recovery has been quite promising in that people are still contravening, and when we're on patrols, anyone that's contravening gets a ticket. And we're currently, in comparison for July last year, we're 18% down. So you can kind of see that recovery. And if you look at page 13 on appendix, sorry, wrong page. If you look at page 7, that gives you an idea of the performance in graph form, and you can see that there's been a sharp increase in July. We have now got August figures as well, and for August it's pretty consistent with July, so this may be the new sort of normal that we can expect from the operation. I think what we're doing now is we're monitoring these figures closely, and it's really a case of let's see what happens over the next few months. We've got the winter months coming. There may be some downturn depending on if there's any local lockdowns. We're unsure, and I think that's the thing to be mindful of. We really can't guess what's going to happen over the next few months. But all the figures and the assumptions we've made in this document is that there will be a gradual increase as each month goes on to the point that we get to the levels we've previously seen from previous years. Just to give you on 2.4 of the covering report, it just gives you an idea of what that looks like in each area, and you can see that most areas are down, but surprisingly, Malden are 22% up on July last year, Rochford are 5% up, and Brentwood's only 5% down. Whereas if you look at comparison for Chelmsford and Basildon, they're still, although they're issuing quite large numbers, they're 30% down on normal usage. And an early analysis of that could be that the city centres, you know, there are less vehicles coming in from the commuter element and into the workplaces, but obviously a lot more people are working from home. So whether people are looking more at their local areas or they're working from home and they're going to high streets within their local areas might have a factor on that. But there's quite a clear shift there between sort of like, I suppose, what you could call the larger retail areas against the more local sort of high streets. And I think really the impact is from a financial point of view. You can see that the April to July comparison, income is £428,000 down in comparison to the previous year and our estimate of business place. And we are, based on assumptions, we are potentially looking at the income will be £549,000 down this year compared to last year. Now, that does take into account that we made quite healthy surpluses in the previous year. So if you turn to page 12 on Appendix A, we sort of provide, this is a bit of modelling that we've created for ourselves just to get an idea of what's happening to the account. There's a lot of figures on there. Hopefully it's quite self-explanatory, but you can see from that that we've got the 1920 figures and the outturns and what that means quarterly, monthly and weekly. And we've sort of modelled that into this year. So you can see from April to July, you know, we started in quite a deficit position, and that's slowly increased to July, that we're actually running the function in a surplus position, which is good. So we're covering our costs and a bit more. And then really those assumptions are based on it's going to improve to the end of March. So we could potentially be looking at a surplus position for the TRO and the enforcement operation of 125,000 surplus, which would be very good considering the situation we started the year in. But that doesn't take into account any of the spend that we have in our reserve. So I've separated the two out so that we can kind of see from an operational point of view what our costs are to operate and what's coming in and whether we're running at a surplus. But then, you know, when you look at Michael's figures and at the end of the year figures, that will include the spends from the reserve. So I've included them in the bottom half of that table. And on the very bottom line, that shows the reserves that we hold as from 1st of March 2020, and then the impact on that when we take into account funds that we've allocated and spend to date from the reserves. And I've also included the £200,000 signs and lines maintenance. But if you take that all into account, there's a potential for the account to make a surplus, and the reduction in the reserves will potentially be 1.8. But I will go with the caveat that that's based on assumptions at this point in time and based on the recovery we've seen to date, but that may change. And I think throughout the next few joint committee meetings, we will be giving updates based on these figures, and we'll probably have a clearer picture by December as to that position. And then if you're interested, within Appendix A, that sort of like narrows down the information to each of the areas and the impact for each area. But from as far as PCN income, it is slowly increasing. Residence permit income is as expected, and power display income is also down, which we expect due to the lack of traffic in and around the centres. And as far as the recovery side of things, that's sort of business as usual. The back office has been up and running since 1st of June, and our recovery rate is currently 71%, which is around those expected levels that we should expect. So really, moving forward, it's just monitoring, you know, the business case as it stands. We've had to totally remodel how we operate our operation. Russell's touched on that. And it's going to be looking at the recovery and if we need to make any decisions to the operation model moving forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Binder. Does anybody have any questions? Again, I have no H's on display and I can't see anything else. So on that basis, Mr. Binder, would you move on for item 8, review of policies?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, from the onset of the parking partnership, we created 3 policies. We had the civil parking enforcement discretion policy, the parking partnership operational protocols, which we call POP, and the parking enforcement framework, which we call the PEP. And these really set out how we go about our business, and regarding the discretion policy, where we may or may not cancel PCNs and the discretion behind that. These really only change if there's fundamental changes to legislation, so there has been no fundamental change at present. So we've reviewed the policies, they're still fit for purpose, and we feel there's no changes to be made at this point, and then we will review them in a further 12 months' time. And hopefully at that point we can start adding some stuff about footway parking in there, which I'll touch on in a minute.
Well, that's next, I think. Again, are there any questions? I've got no H's on the side. No, right, Nick, please carry on. Footway parking now. This one we do want to hear about.
Okay, as you know from previous meetings, we've there's been various consultations and discussions mooted around government, and there was a Transport Select Committee as a result of an initial consultation around footway parking. In the last week, we've been issued a link to a government consultation whereby they are seeking views from the enforcement authorities regarding footway parking, and it looks like they're moving towards giving the authorities, the enforcement authorities outside of London, some form of control over the parking. So the 3 areas that they've asked to consult on and ask our views on that is, one is around improving the TRO process. So what that means is at the moment you can go through the long-winded process of putting in a TRO to ban footway parking on a particular part of pavement, but that involves a lot of signage and a lot of street clutter, and it's not really appropriate to do that in all cases. So one of the areas is they were looking to improve that side of it, which would hopefully fast track that, but that's not something that we would necessarily want to support. The one that we're very interested in is they're looking at decriminalising obstruction of the footway. So currently this is the one where only the police can deal with obstructions that aren't supported by a parking restriction. And they're looking to work in tandem with the police, which is very similar to what we do with pedestrian crossing zigzags, in that both the police and the enforcement authorities can issue a PCN for obstructing the footway. Now, that would work very well in that there would have to be some guidance and some policy around what constitutes an obstruction, but that's something that ourselves and NEP favour and tend to support. And the other option is a full footway parking ban, which is similar to London. Now, that sounds attractive, but that does come with its problems in that there are a lot of areas that we already rely on cars to park part on the footway, and we even in some areas, you know, mark the bays to show that. And then it becomes the reverse of what we got now. So you have to do a TRO in the areas where you want to allow the footway parking. So it's got some good merits, but the obstruction seems to be the one where we're actually dealing with issues that are causing genuine obstructions and causing a problem. So that's currently out to consultation. We will be going back as a parking partnership. So obviously I'm open to any views from any of the members. Our view is that we go for the decriminalised obstruction and take that from the police or share it with the police, which enables us to deal with full obstructions off the highway. But if there's any other views around that, because we can comment in all three areas, and I think another part of that is when we initially looked at the obstruction side of things from taking it from the police, and this links into the improving our TRO process, is we were looking also to take the obstruction, the 10-metre rule on junctions under the highway code. So whereas we're approached by people to put yellow lines on these junctions so that we can enforce it under our legislation, we would also be looking to take that from the police and issue tickets for people parking within 10 metres. In this consultation, they seem to have watered down that area, and they're only looking for obstruction on the footway. So it looks like they've taken that off the table, but we will still respond in that that's an area that we would like to be able to take from the police as well. So it saves us having to do the double yellow lines on junctions and go through the long TRO process. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at, and I need to respond to this, and I'm open to any comments or discussion around that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now we have a few people wishing to ask questions and speak on this. First up, Councillor Mitchell. You'd like to turn your video on, Robert? Thank you.
It all on and then turn it off again. Right, that's better. Too many buttons to press. Just keep the camera open. Yes, this is something that we have debated at NEP in great detail. I have been, as you know, for those people who've been on SEPP, when I have made the comments and discussed the decriminalisation of obstruction, is the key to it, because actually footway parking is invariably or often obstruction, but not always. Whereas footway parking on its own, and actually calling it, pavement parking, we shouldn't be doing that. We should be getting the message across to everybody, that includes members and officers, that this is about obstruction. It's not about footway parking, because one can be it and the other ones cannot necessarily. And we're looking at the junctions as well, and we have been looking at junctions as well before. What constitutes obstruction? Well, in NEP we've been looking at, and we've already got a policy in place, which we agreed a couple of meetings ago for, in fact, last October, I think it was, which is looking at a nice simple method of saying 1, 2, 3 centimetres, which is the same as 4 feet. If there is space on the inside, if that makes sense, of a vehicle that is parking, of 123 centimetres or 4 feet, then of course there's clearance for getting people through there. But it's just a rule of thumb that if you've got a nice wide footway, then you can park on it a bit, but not in order to obstruct the footway. And it's about the obstruction. It really is fully about the message of obstruction that we don't want to see, and we need to allow people to get through. The one other small comment, of course, which I know Nick is fully aware of, but didn't quite mention for those people who are unfamiliar, the police, of course, will issue an FPN, a fixed penalty notice for obstruction, and the money goes to government. The CEO will issue a PCN and the money doesn't. So just a small issue, but it's quite critical in some of the ways we might think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Efter. Councillor Efter? You have your hand raised.
Yes, I'm off mute now. Councillor Efter, Watford District Council. I'm in agreement with the previous speaker. The decriminalising of obstruction is, I think, the way to go, because especially in Rochford, we have roads that go back quite a time, and they weren't designed for great big people carriers that you have now. So sometimes they need to be parked on the pavement, but as long as they're not obstruction, it doesn't really seem to be a problem. When it starts to become obstruction, that's when you've got the problem. So I agree we should go for the criminalisation of obstruction so we can actually give the tickets out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mike McCrory, Chelmsford.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I agree with comments that Nick made and also the previous two speakers. But obviously, in the inner urban areas, such as Chelmsford, we do, as Nick said, actually mark out on the pavements where parking is actually permitted. And I can think of one road, Old Court, where actually the pavement, people just have to walk in the road because the vehicles are parked on the pavement. It is so narrow. So with that caveat, that if we would have to have a TRO to allow that, then yeah, I'm all in favour, and it's about time, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Next up, Councillor Harrison, Basildon.
Thank you, Chairman. Listening to Nick, I fully agree with the option he suggested, like the other two speakers. Interesting what the County Council suggested of the 4 foot and 4 foot, but I think the 4 foot should only apply in one direction. That is the 4 feet available for the pedestrian or the lady with a pushchair or someone in a wheelchair. That space should be the thing, because otherwise the argument would well be, well, I'm 4 foot onto the pavement, you know, that satisfies one criteria, and they can get arguments from that. I think the criteria should be quite clear. What obstruction is if you're not leaving at least 4 foot available for the pedestrian. Problem comes then with overgrown hedges on footpaths, and I can see where the 4 foot might not come from. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Finally, Councillor Wagland. Leslie, you're on.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Entirely agree with the baseline points that everyone has made. Just following on from Councillor Harrison, it seems to me that my biggest concern when responding to these sorts of consultations is that we need to get it fully understood that anything other than very straightforward, clear blue water, in my lawyer's terms, enforcement there is no means of enforcing at all. In my experience, we're reaching a stage where if you give anything by way of room for argument in relation to enforcement, it becomes unenforceable at anything approaching a reasonable cost and time. So if we're going to get enforcement, it's got to be at the decriminalised level, and it absolutely has got to be as clear as Councillor Harrison was suggesting. If you give any inch, it won't be. At the moment, I was talking to someone the other day, and we were both saying that in relation to another lawyer, and that in relation to enforcement, if you have anything which constitutes an argument in relation to these sorts of points, once you're talking lawyers, you're talking about a 1, 2, 3 day trial. You know, these things become completely untenable. So I'm really, really keen that whatever is done is so crystal clear that it becomes easy to be done. And then, as you can see, with plenty of other types of ordinary enforcement, it stops the argument and it means that you do get effective enforcement. At the moment, what we've got is a situation where we have no enforcement because it's too much and with the wrong body.
Thank you, Leslie. I now have a notice of Councillor Hart. Robert, can you wait a minute? I'm going to go through Councillor Hart first.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to agree with Mr. Binder's comments to start with. I think that's the right way to go forward, but also to add, as you said, the junction parking that needs to be added as well, even if it's just in your reply to the consultation, because that is a growing issue as well. And obviously, if you force people off the pavement, they're going to push the boundaries up to the junctions. But that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, back to Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Just to coming back on a couple of those points. So Councillor Harrison correctly pointed out it needs to be sensible. And the 4-foot proposal from the NEP is that's 4 foot of pavement available for parking, buggies and all the other things that need to go through on the inside. It's not 4 foot available for people to park on. This is walking space, not car space. So it's just in between the vehicle and whatever the obstruction happened to be. And the other bit, of course, is that when the CEOs are enforcing, they all take photographs of the offence with reference, and it's quite obvious whether that's, that provides the evidence that helps to verify those offences. On just another matter about the double yellow lines and the lining of junctions, we are now in a position at NEP where in conjunction with the parking manager and the chairman, we can authorise the putting in of double yellow lines, as I understand it, without a TRO. Because effectively, all it is doing is reminding people of the highway code, which they've long forgotten, and they can't measure 10 metres anyway. So actually, it has to be bleeding obvious, big, obvious and different, and made obvious, so that people can't then complain about it afterwards. So obstructing where there isn't a double yellow line is just a pain in the neck, as Councillor Wagland pointed out.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Mr. Panther, you wish to say something, sir?
Yeah, just a small shout for the officers on the ground. Just reiterating what some people have said, but also where we need to be very careful with this is that we don't have officers on the ground having arguments with people over measurements and bits like that. We don't want people on the road with rulers and bits like that. So I think whilst there's the legislation side of it, for the protocol for the officers just needs to be very, very clear, that so the officers don't find themselves on the ground having a debate with a driver over distances and space and what is obstruction, what's not. So just wanted to add that for the purpose of the officers that will have to be out there working this and dealing with the drivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panther. I would like to say a few things just before we finish up. As Mr. Binder and Councillor Mitchell know, I've been ragging Roger Hurst, the PFCC, about this virtually since he got elected. And I think thanks to that and thanks to Mitchell's Councillor Mitchell's efforts, we've got a long way. My personal preference has always been for option 2, which is the one that everybody else seems to be going for. and I'd be very thankful if we could all back that. One thing I would say to you about the 4 foot, 123 centimetres, I actually sit on the Brentford Disabled Groups forum. You may not be aware of it, but actually that is the measure that is supposed to be provided for a wheelchair to get through anyway, and is somewhere in the highway code and certainly the disabled code of conduct that you have to leave that much room for them. Therefore, I would definitely support that distance as well. I'm sorry, I'm falling over my words. Right, that's it from me. Back to Nick. Date and time of next meeting.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Cloak. I just wanted to pick up on a letter I've received from the Parking Partnership in the last.
Sorry, I'm very sorry. Yes, carry on.
Yeah. No, it's after the agenda item had gone out. I've been in regular contact with Richard Walker, who's my equivalent at North Essex Parking Partnership. And it's really looking at any arrangements beyond March 2022 when our current joint committee agreement expires. And I suppose over the last 12 months, we've been on and off talking about potential, business models and how that can look moving into obviously the COVID coming along has sort of changed the confidence around those business models to a degree. But Richard's sent a letter to the Parking Partnership, which has come through the discussions he's had with lead officers and his joint committee. And one of the actions was to send a letter to ourselves and Essex County Council. And it's really, NEP have had some initial discussion. So this hasn't been discussed in detail how this works, but some broad aims as to how a new arrangement can look beyond 2022. And I suppose it's what I'll do is I'll send a copy of this out to the chairman and we can have a discussion about that. But it might be an opportunity for us to have an informal meeting to start looking at this potential arrangements beyond that point. But I'm also mindful that there's the government white paper. There's lots of talks about councils joining together and how that could potentially affect what is the partnership today and how that could affect moving forward. So I think there's a few other equations that have come in since that may or may not have a different look to the partnership. And I think I'm unclear as to what that would be at the moment. But I think we still need to start looking at the 2022 deadline, and I know when I've spoke to Liz Burr that she's putting together some key milestones regarding cabinet decisions and that from an Essex County Council point of view, and she's going to contact me and Richard regarding those timelines. But it's just really to make the note that they have sent this to the joint committee. I'll be sending it to the chairman. We can have a discussion about that, and then we'll make an arrangement to meet up and talk about that informally. It's everything that's in there. It's stuff I support. Me and Richard sort of work together on a lot of this, and we see it as a viable option moving forward. So there's no surprises in there, but it is something we will need to start discussing as a joint committee. And I don't know if anyone's got any comments regarding that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've no H's or hands up, but yes, be very happy to get involved and help with that. And I'm sure the two county councillors would as well. Oh yeah, no, we do. I'm just trying to work out who LB is, but we do have Liz, please.
That's me. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cloak. Yes, I think it was just to update the committee. As Nick has said, within Essex County Council, we've started to pull together some timelines and some sort of process and governance to work out what we will need to go through. And myself and Martin Hockney, who's our finance lead, are going to be arranging to meet with Councillor Bentley and his two deputies to talk through the process that we think we need to go through. And then what we want to do is to communicate that out to the two chairmen of the partnership so that everybody knows a process we want to go through, and then we can do something jointly, collaboratively working together to talk about the next iteration of the parking partnership. So yeah, as Nick says, we've been starting to articulate it through at our end, if you like, at County Hall. What I want to do is to understand from Councillor Bentley how he wishes to engage in the process and with the partnerships. And also we just need to understand our governance, because the previous agreement and the last time we extended, we were able to do that without too much governance because the principles were already enshrined in the joint committee agreement. But this time we need to start the whole thing again in terms of a joint committee agreement, which means I think on the Essex County Council side it will need to be a key decision, which kind of brings a whole different level of governance in. So I want to be clear on that before I then come out with a kind of a proposal and a timeline to the two chairmen, or myself or Councillor Bentley come out to the two chairmen.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harrison, you've signalled.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm concerned. We're talking about doing something different, but the indications are the only people going to be involved are the two chairmen of the two partnerships. My view is I'm a great believer in open government and that all members and representatives of local authorities, such as myself, on this should be aware of these letters and what's actually in them, because we're actually part of the partnership. Without the councils, it wouldn't operate anyway.
Thank you, David. But I think we're as Nick was saying, we're talking about just an initial idea of where we're going with the chairs, but then as soon as possible, hold an informal meeting to brief all the councillors. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, sorry if that was misunderstood. Yeah, I've only just got the letter, so obviously everyone will have an opportunity to have a look at that. It was really in the very near future. I was sort of thinking more weeks rather than months. Is that we all get together as an informal meeting and start to put these ideas on the table, and that will be all joint committee members and lead officers from each of those areas. But I can send the letter and attachment out as soon as possible. That's no problem. And then that'll be a sound board really to start looking at what we do going forward.
Thank you very much. Does that answer you, David? Yes, he looks happy. Thank you. I'll move on quickly actually, rather than passing this to Nick. We are now allowed to hold a virtual meeting for a TRO public subcommittee, and we shall be holding one on Thursday the 24th of December at 10 o'clock. Both myself and Councillor McCrory have already committed. Councillor Hart, you've been asked if you could attend, but we haven't had a reply from you yet. Can you confirm whether you can attend or not? If not, we need to find somebody else.
Yes, I can. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Nick, we're sorted on that. Would you like to say anything else, Nick, or shall I just state the date and time for the next?
I'm all fine, thank you.
Okay, right. Next meeting, 3rd December 2020 at 1400. I'm very glad to say that we can close this meeting at just gone 10 to 3. Not the quickest meeting we've ever done, but it's certainly not the longest either. Thank you very much for everybody for coming.
Thank you, Chairman. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.